The story of the little fairy and the shepherd. There was a beautiful lake in the middle of the valley surrounded by mountains. There is such a beautiful environment that even heaven is ashamed. 7 fairies, 7 sisters visit the shores of that lake every year in summer. They keep their wings under a tree and happily play in the water. Desolate surroundings. After rejoicing for exactly 7 days, the wings flew to Nandankanan, their own land. Meanwhile, even if they do not keep the news of some nearby villages, they keep all the news of the fairies. But an orphan shepherd boy of that village. He grazes the cows, plays the flute and watches the fairy factory from afar. Once he fell in love with the youngest fairy. What an incredibly sweet look. Seeing him, the shepherd's flute sounds all the heavenly tunes. Fairies from afar listen to it and wonder who plays such a beautiful tune. This tune is unknown even to the birds of Nandankanan. They listen with fascination, but the shepherd stays hidden, no one sees him. What happened once? An evil idea arose in the shepherd's head. While the fairies were busy bathing, he came quietly to the tree where the fairies' wings were spread. He chose the smallest pair of wings and hid them in the trunk of a large tree. Then slowly moved away from there. Now after 7 days, when it was time for the fairies to go, it was found that their little sister's wings were not there. They did not find them even after searching a lot. Meanwhile, Father's strict order: they should not leave heaven for more than 1 week. How? The eldest fairy explained to her younger sister, "By the way, sister, we have to go, and if we go, we won't be able to come back before next year. You better look for a pair of wings from here, and come back to the country when you find it." How? We will explain to the father that he should not be angry. The 6 fairies flew away, leaving the little sister alone on the shore of the lake. The poor little fairy sat down and cried. Seeing him crying like that, the shepherd boldly came out from hiding. After hearing everything, he took him to his house, then played the flute for a long time. The fairy was very pleased to think that it was this shepherd's flute that had given her so much joy from afar, and it was not long before they became friends. The shepherd and the fairy live in a hut at one end of the village, tending the cows together. Seeing the shepherd playing the flute and the fairies dancing, the villagers decided that they should get married. The shepherd agreed. What else did the fairy do? He agreed. Then one day they got married in a big festival. The shepherd and the fairy spend their days quite happily. Sometimes Fairy's eyes filled with water thinking about the days gone by. Thinking about her aunts, how happy they would have been. Nandankanan's beautiful beauty, father's love, how the father has left his beloved daughter is also shameful. At such times, the shepherd plays sweet tunes to him on the flute, tells him all the stories of the world, people, and eventually they forget everything and fall asleep. Exactly 1 year ago, a boy came in the fairy's arms. After getting him, Fairy seemed to forget all the sorrows he had. A year has passed. Fairy had forgotten, but the shepherd thought it was time for his aunts to come. Right in the shepherd's eyes, the fairy sisters came down to the shore of the lake one by one. But they did not go down into the water and started searching here and there. The shepherd then went in front of them and introduced himself. They were happy to hear that the little girl was fine and came with the shepherd to their house. Then the 7 sisters hugged each other and cried, laughed and talked for the whole night. The little boy was loved by the aunties. Just after 7 days, when it was time for them to leave, the shepherd rushed out and brought a pair of fairy wings and told him the whole story. Fairy listened in shock. At the end, Rigamij put on a pair of wings and said, "There is no forgiveness for what you have done. You stay here alone with your son. I went with Didi." Then he really came to the shore of the lake and met Didi and flew with them to their home in heaven. But even in heaven there is no peace. Chopari's mind is in a small hut in the mountain village on the banks of the Sarovar, where her son and the shepherd live. One by one he began to remember those days, those nights lying awake talking about them, falling asleep listening to the shepherd's whistle in the lonely fields. A clever shepherd did, but the man is not bad. He could have given the fans back if he had wanted to. There is everything in heaven. Everything is beautiful here, but there is no love. There is no such thing as friendship. And those who have tasted sorrow once know that continuous happiness is also very boring. There is no such thing as sorrow in heaven. The most important thing is that he can't forget the little child who called him mother after a few days. I don't know how much he is crying. Can the shepherd handle that child alone? There is no sleep in the eyes of the little fairy. When she closes her eyes, she hears the cry of a small child. She also cries and only thinks about these things. No matter what the children do, the eyes of the elders do not escape. In the end, their father also came to know about it. He said, "You have broken the rules of the fairy world to get a family in the human world. I have lost some respect for this. I won't get that respect back by just increasing your punishment. You go, wherever you can go and find happiness." The king left, probably with tears in his eyes. Meanwhile, the shepherd was having a very happy day. Since Peri left, the house is messy. He can't feed his son properly. He can't put him to sleep. An old lady somehow managed to keep her alive by looking after her. The fairy got angry with him while leaving. That's normal. She never thought about the boy in her lap. And will he ever come back? As a shepherd, he used to come and sit on the bank of the lake, under the tree, with his son in his arms. He doesn't even want to play the flute these days. Even that day, I was sitting on the shore of the lake. Suddenly it seemed that someone was coming down from the sky. At first, the eagle thought it was going to hide with the baby in its lap. Then its eyes and face brightened when it realized this is a little fairy. The shepherd thought that the fairy must have come to take his son because he could not stay. The shepherd slowly walked towards the fairy with his son in his lap. But the little fairy was doing it. She got down to the ground and opened her wings first. Then he took out a flint from somewhere and lit it on fire. Then he took the pair of wings and threw them firmly into the fire. Eki kata you, the shepherd came running, looked at the fairy with a questioning look. And you can't go back. And I don't want to go. Here you are, I have a son. I can't go anywhere without my family and be happy. Chopari ran and took the child in her arms. They walked calmly on the village road. A pair of fairy wings started to burn behind.